Once more, I pondered the tomes, and now return from the mountain pilgrimage with another video. Still Kemono Michi though. Part 2 of my 3-part video coverage. Check out the previous one if you wish to have more context, but otherwise, you do you, boo. Moments before the pivotal zenith of his life, professional wrestler Macadamian Ogre, aka Mao, muses upon his fated match with the fearsome Animal Mask. Steve the Standard arrives to herald the imminent duel as Mao steams in anticipation. Weighing in at 178 pounds, the Macadamian Ogre squares up against his ultimate foe, Animal Max. The crowd goes wild and the battle commences, but wait, upon jumping from the ropes, Animal Mask is encased in a sinister green glow and vanishes mid-air, stunning every sapient being in the arena. Mao is understandably upset by this, going so far as to call Animal Mask a cowardly chicken nugget in front of the media. Of course, Animal Mask is nowhere to be found in this world, and Mao produces a single lonesome tear as he aggressively stomps away. Waluigi ponders Genzou's escape, but moves on quickly. Later, Mao exhumes a wellspring of sorrowful tears, mourning the sudden disappearance of his lifelong rival. He goes on a soulful walk through the park to watch the sunset over the sea, but poetically ends up sodden in the rain. Meanwhile, Genzou is living his best life, watching a broccoli sleep. Shigure manages to rip him away from it though. This gives the villains, Gang and Misha, a prime opportunity to capture the precious Hiroyuki as revenge for Genzou's brazen assault on them. The plan is to use an expensive meat to lure their prey into easy swiping distance. Very solid. Perfectly infallible. The G-Squad is out in the forest, looking for a Dragedogula plant, when Genzou receives a terrible message from the spirit world about hero yogurt. Shigure calls him out on his lies, despite there being a tie-in to reality with his concern. It seems all was well, as the pup snatchers look bedraggled, and Edgar seems disappointed. Flashback to earlier, the plan is put into action, and executed perfectly, up until Hiroyuki reaches melee distance. Gang is instantly caught in his sorceress hypnosis, and begins to dilly-dally, giving the pet shop's guardian time to catch wind of the foul play and rescue the little Hiroyuki-sama. Suddenly, the cry of the Dragedogula echoes through the woods, naturally signaling its location to Genzou, who runs off to search. There's some screaming off camera, but Genzou was only disappointed that there were no demon beasts, only wriggly vegetation. Shigure attempts to cheer him up with the Harry Potter reference, but Genzou is not enthused in the slightest. Hanako receives a bounty of intrusive thoughts, while the rest of the party begin to quarrel. Suddenly, the voices of the Dragedogula cease, and a slow panning shot reveals the only realistic outcome of this situation. Back at home base, Aunt-chan informs the homies about the pup snatchers, and creates a perfect illustration of the perpetrators, who are currently in recovery. Just as Gang swears to never mess with Genzou again, he destroys the entire doorway to their house, states their crimes, and takes Gang to task by tossing him onto the streets, and giving him the full spin cycle right into the village food cart. Claus-san, the accountant, watches in awe as the civilians celebrate a job well done. The sick moves he just pulled off reminds Genzou of his wrestling days, and we are sucked back into Mao's storyline, where he is in the midst of ejecting some muscly fellers from his abode and brooding. Someone hooked our boy up with therapy at some point, and Mao is told that he's obsessing over Animal Mask. A hobby might be what he needs to get his mind off his rival, but this proves to be futile. In other matters, this big shot vampire lolly heard news of Princess Altena's hero summoning, and got permission from the Demon King to do her own ritual, a Demon King summon. As fate would have it, Mao is brought to the very same realm a few moments later, and asked by this lady, who I'm just gonna say is named Joanna, to defeat the hero. Mao is shown the visage of the dreaded hero, finding him to be Animal Mask, and celebrating this joyous day. After the ritual summoning, Joanna likewise celebrates the exciting coincidence, determining that the end must be finally nigh for her rival, Linda. Sometime in the past, a fish teaches the young Joda how to fight, but she is ultimately bested by Linda the Destroyer, who remains characteristically gluttonous, even in larval form. After consuming orbs together, Joanna was thus defeated many more times. It was then that she became obsessed with her ultimate foe. What could be the secret behind Linda Blair's overwhelming strength? One time at a party, the competitors whipped out their vampires to compare. Joanna's servant is an elderly old lady, whereas Linda Bola's is a pathetic little drop of pond water, and thus hassled for being unworthy. Joanna strikes while the iron is hot, and offers to train Carmilla with the intention to engage in guileful mind control hypnotics, but is instantly denied. Despite despite being an embarrassment to her clan, Carmilla is well liked as is. This enrages the Joner, who then challenges Linda to a Pokemon battle. Carmilla is nervous, but Linda accepts due to the rapidly increasing time constraint on the best selection of orc cheese and cockatrice wieners at the party. Nevertheless, Linda inspires her servant with her words. The time for battle has arrived, and the conditions for victory are set. Should Joanna's Rose win, Linda's Carmilla will be replaced by a vampire of Joanna's choosing. Otherwise, things will remain unchanged. The vampires have at it under the moonlight, stabs glistening with fervor. Carmilla is clearly outmatched, however, and takes a couple of sinister L's. Now on her knees, she looks over at her mistress, stands back up, then is laid low. As expected, a lesser vampire cannot beat an elder, and Joanna declares her Rose's victory. But wait, Carmilla is still wriggling around. She's desperate and weepy, taking multiple blows to the head while clinging to her foe. Linda decides then to call off the battle, and Rose wins. For the most part. Carmilla Vanstein begs to be spared from separating from her mistress, while the victors revel in their opponent's suffering. Linda hits her with the then states firmly that she wishes to keep Carmilla as recompense for going back on the conditions of her duel. Joanna has Linda Blair Kauto. Everyone is shook, even Joanna, who then dramatically exits the stage. Upon returning home with confidence, they run into Linda Blair on the road and exit the carriage to converse, I guess. Libra attempts to explain how Carmilla's value comes from her loyalty and familiarity, not skill or grace. This fails to change anything, but Linda Bulia was aware of the futility and goes on to state that due to her hereditary warpath, she is obligated to at least stand up for her homie. She then proceeds to strip naked, menacingly transform into a dragon, then challenge those hoes to a duel. Later, Joanna is peeved that Linda strode forth to defeat the hero first, and wishes to snag those pebbles of glory from Linda Bulia's small baby hands. While Joanna was fuming, Mao was being shown the arsenal and feeling disappointed by the lack of respect for the rules of wrestling. Simultaneously, Carmilla was recovering from being obliterated by a sandworm, which reminds Linda of the time she whooped Joanna and checked on Carmilla's recovery. Carmilla went nuts with anxious zeal and had to be incapacitated to calm her down. Linda reflects on what a silly sausage that dumb servant is, as Genzou makes sure to toss some Hiroyuki dukes on the recovery heap. On a splendid clear day, the hunter Celes barges into Genzou's nest, immediately proclaiming him to be the demon beast killer. She dies for her insolence in various different fashions. After being consoled by fellow women, Celeste is questioned about her intentions for visiting so abruptly. She's a new hunter in town who was told about Genzou's prowess. He doesn't appreciate his colleagues broadcasting this, but Celery wishes no ill will upon them. Instead, she pleads with Genzou to make her his student. He rejects her request in favor of his plans to lie in wait for stray cats. Shigure scolds him for bothering the neighbors with his antics, then notices that the strange lady is a babe. Genzou denies this fact, but Celes refuses to acknowledge his disapproval, and a brief scuffle breaks out. Suddenly, Genzou cops a feel on a feely feel. Celes attempts to flee, but Genzoid reveals her secret. She is a lizard, then reveals the truth of her lineage. This instantly pivots Genpo's opinion on the matter, and he accepts Cellular's proposition. The others are rightfully concerned due to Genzou's predilections, but their concern is abated by Silly's resolve, and so they depart to the mountains to train. First, squats, where Genzou finds that the scales don't cover her thighs. Next, core and back work, for unrelated reasons. Shigure isn't enthused by Gibby's blatant depravity, and takes over by showing Celes how to go fast. Seeing as Shogurt ran off, Hanako decides that a lunch break is in order, but Celes can't eat spiders. Probably. A training montage ensues, whereby they all help the new hunter through a rigorous training course. She eventually graduates with a degree in wrestling, and tears in her eyes, now known as Celes XXL. Actually, this wasn't what Celiac wanted at all, which surprises the homies. Shigure slides in to confirm why Celes wanted Genzou's help, to which she begrudgingly says something the audience doesn't get to hear yet. Genzou goes feral, shirt vaporizing like ash into the wind. Now induced into an animalistic fury, Genzou lays siege to the Hunters Guild, calling out for the Guildmaster to come forth. This guy can't read the rune and explodes. Celes arrives to calm Genzou down, but fails due to her beastly presence riling up the hunters. This causes further casualties en masse, and even those begging for mercy get no quarter. The Guildmaster arrives a moment too late, finding his place of business upended. At the peace talks, Genzou seizes the high ground and continues to hold fast, while the Guildmaster digs his own grave a little deeper. Apparently, the hunters were bullying Celeste for being a scaly woman. She takes over to quell Genzou's rage, which probably helps. After settling things down, Celeste states that upon attaining strength, she hasn't really cared about the rampant racism. This causes a wave of heartfelt apologies from the hunters, but that water shatters upon Genzou's rocky shore of rejection, and they take it to the yard. He gives Celeste an inspired pep talk in preparation for her first wrestler's bout. It doesn't hit home, and no one is particularly into this except Genzou, it would seem. He threatens to execute everyone in response, which spurs Celeste and this guy on. They square up, blades in hand, and the battle commences. A few quick flourishes and lithesome footwork later, it is apparent that Celeste has improved, specifically in her speed. The homies cheer her on from the sidelines. As the battle rages on, Clawson emerges from around the block to perceive the spectacle. When Celeste suddenly strikes a sexy pose, it isn't very effective. Carmilla is strangled, and Celeste likely feels the same. Her daggers escape from her grasp, but her foe has lifted both his arms, allowing her to evade to the left and complete a full suplex, seizing victory from the jaws of defeat. Later, both sides are equally sportsmanlike and call it a tie for some silly reason. Genzou crushes their happy ending once more, unable to accept a near apology. However, the guildmaster comes forth to state that operations at the guild have been rough lately. A masked freak has been attacking the hunters with strange moves, and they haven't been able to fulfill many requests. As such, their pent-up aggression must have come out in the form of racism. Genzou, seeing that he might be part of the problem, now accepts their humble apologies. On the way back, Shigure attempts to pry the truth about Genzou's nightlife out of him, but Clawson intersects with their path. He was impressed with the mock battle from before and wishes to host an event. The promise of profit, merchandise, food, and the hypnotic allure of fighting spirit convince them all to help Clawson, and Genzou is once more to become a professional wrestler. The day of the event dawns, and many people have arrived to participate, but one thing is missing: animals. Shigure doubts, but Genzou is insistent. Claws compromises by suggesting they get some beastmen to fight. Speaking of which, Miss Kobold appears just in time to be seductively allured. This suddenly gives Gonzo the idea to recruit her husband for the tournament, inviting plenty of misunderstandings along the way. Genzou's obvious red-hot love for fuzzballs riles up Mr. Kobold-san, and they begin to exchange heavy blows to compete for Miss Kobold's love. Their duel reminds Mr. Kobold-san of his glory days in the army, lowering his guard and effectuating his defeat. It's no matter though, as Genzou reminds him of a love long lost, and the two make their way to the arena as comrades. Shigure is confused. Meanwhile, Gang continues his incubational recovery from Genzou's psychological torment, when a couple of familiar faces barge into his sanctum of safety to insist that both him and Misha become professional wrestlers. Gang would do anything but fight Genzou, however. Misha instead offers to be the guiding light for Gong's recovery and accepts. On their way back, Gengure stumbles across orcs planting flowers in a garden. The rehabilitated greenskins greet their king and offer their willingness to help the town, presumably also becoming wrestlers. Carmilla writhes around on Hanako's dirty laundry, but is also forced to become a wrestler a few moments later. At the arena, several hunters arrive to fight, but seem to have misunderstood the assignment. Hataage specifically is slain for his insolence. Then Genzou moves on to explain how pro wrestling works. This guy brings snacks, while an evil blanket gazes menacingly. The administration team works diligently as Genzou observes the fighters, who are still hopelessly lost on the concept of wrestling. Genzou expresses his dissatisfaction, but the merchants have already begun operating, including Shigure, who set up a nice-looking stall. While emitting an ominous dark fog, Genzou reflects on the Sisyphean grunt work of creating a professional wrestling scene in a day, but is sidetracked by his homie's excellent storefront. After he and Hanako peace out, a slimy customer surfaces to purchase smut, revealing Shigure's real profit point. Meanwhile, Michael is psyching herself up, and Hank commentates on the peculiar flavor orcs possess. The fascinating moves from the fighters captivate the crowd, despite the strange commentary. As the tournament continues, the energy both on stage and in the audience expands exponentially. However, Genzou remains unsatisfied due to the lack of dramatic rivalries, which necessitate a core aspect of professional wrestling. Soleil's XXL obliterates Mr. Kobold-san with a slick hurricane maneuver, making way for the primary event, a tag team match between Team Genzou Carmilla and Hataage Misha. The crowd goes freaking nuts and the battle begins. Claws cannot contain his excitement. Hataage is defeated almost instantly, but Carmilla gets into a scuffle with Genzou before he can be finished, which gives him and Misha the opportunity to get synchronously annihilated. The Sith Lord watches on from the shadows as the Catgirl and Playboy are demolished. But wait, it's Gang, who showed up to watch. Unfortunately for him, Clawson noticed an opportunity for drama and pounces, trapping Gang between the zealous crowd and his ultimate fear. The skilled announcer catches on, and Gang is forced into action by everyone present. The crowd cries his name, Wolfgang, 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 as Genzou greets the challenger. Misha motivates Gang with a speech, but falls a moment later to Carmilla's gorilla strength grippers. Gang is traumatized all over again for the sake of entertainment by the intense grasp of Genzou's patented furry cobra twist. Anyway, to celebrate a successful event, the organizers all get together for beers and cheers. Shigure peeps the homies, enjoying a great time together, reflecting on the warm feeling this camaraderie brings. Suddenly, the sharks begin to swarm around her like a dripping corpse, ready to claim monetary compensation for various damages, alcohol purchases, catering services, and such inevitabilities. The Genzou pet shop is once more plunged into watery soup and salted potatoes as penance for their excessive debauchery. And that's the end of part 2 of Kemono Michi, Rise Up. Hey, thanks for watching this far. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, or subscribe. I have a Patreon page for those who want to feed me and my 19 children. Thanks again. Till the next video.